well known to some of you and perhaps not to others. At the core of our work is building relationships. We build relationships through donors, with lay leaders, with organizational partners, and it's through those relationships that we're able to affect our work. And by the way, it's through those same relationships that the core of our engagement philosophy resides, that you do that one by one. From those relationships, we then build networks, whether it's networks of day school leaders, of organizational partners, of foundation professionals, to leverage the work that we all do so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And finally, we work in building knowledge. So we look to build our communal knowledge, whether that's about philanthropic trends or the community studies that we regularly do, or for example, the recent survey, which thank you for many of you participating in that, which gave us a snapshot in time of this crisis and how it's affecting all of us and therefore what the needs might look like. If you could go to the next slide. So having emerged from our strategic planning process last year, we agreed that, al shlosha devarim, on three things we stand. One of them is more and better Jewish philanthropy. This organization has been central in developing a cadre of philanthropists for this community that have fueled and powered and given us much of what we have. And we understand that this is really core to what our Jewish future is, that ensuring that the next generation of philanthropists is there. Roxanne will speak in a moment a little bit more about how that actually plays out in this context. The second is the dramatically increased engagement. I think many of you know that that's been a focal point of ours for the last 5 years, recognizing that we're the fourth largest Jewish community in the country, and by most conventional metrics, the least engaged. And we think there's an enormous opportunity in that. But that's an opportunity that lives at the higher end of Maslow's hierarchy, up there in that meaning realm. And what we're facing right now, which for people and organizations is literally an existential threat, is more in the last part of ensuring a resilient, secure Jewish community. And so we, for now, have pivoted to focus heavily in that area. And we expect to be focusing there for the coming years. So that gives you a snapshot of how these dynamic circles work for us and how we pivot according to the needs of the community. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Roxanne Cohen, our Managing Director of Community Impact, who focuses in that resilience area. Roxanne was literally tested in the fire, in the crucible, the wildfires emergency of a couple of years ago, and really comported herself extraordinarily well as a professional in galvanizing our response. She's done so here as well, and you'll see the results of her and her team's work. So Roxanne, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you who have carved out time in your day to join us. I know that there are some people on this call who have maybe heard pieces of this information shared. So we'll catch up and go through this fairly quickly and get a little bit more into this moment in time. I also know that there are a number of colleagues on this call who work directly on the front lines with a number of our Jewish community organizations, focusing on engagement or social services and meeting the needs across the board. And I just really want to express my admiration to all of you for how quickly you have pivoted and responded and adjusted and made difficult decisions and made creative decisions to help move us, our community, along the way. So as Danny mentioned, and as many of you know because you participated, we conducted a survey of community organizations. Already knowing how quickly this situation is evolving, some of this feels a little bit like ancient history. We collected this information up through March 24th, but it still did ground us in an early understanding of the scope of the need and the challenge that is facing our Jewish community. So we distributed the survey to about 200 organizations and synagogues area-wide, East, West Bay, Marin, Sonoma, Peninsula. We received 85 responses from all different type of organizations. We know that, we could double these numbers if we really are looking at the full scope of our Jewish community ecosystem. But there are, from these 85 organizations, over 160,000 people who are generally served on a monthly basis, thousands of employees, and the projected revenue loss caused by shelter in place is just staggering. And again, these were projections, these were early estimates. This was still at a time when we were hopeful that the shelter in place would be for a very limited span. It has yet most of the organizations knew at the outset that they had to plan for multiple scenarios, including the one that we're finding us in right now, where there's still no clear end in sight to our shelter in place. Those organizations that have felt the most severe immediate impact of the revenue loss are those that are so highly dependent on membership dues, earned income, including our JCCs, where up to 90% of their revenue comes from monthly paid, generally memberships, all of which have been suspended during this time of closure. We also know that there's concern about lost fundraising revenue, particularly among smaller organizations that hinge a large amount of their annual fundraising on springtime events and have had to either cancel or postpone these events. We know that the situation is changing. We know that there's some short-term concerns, and then of course there are longer-term concerns once we really see what the, how our economy rebounds from this pretty intense period, and what the ongoing effect of economic downturn might be on the participants in our organizations and our patrons. So what are the most pressing concerns that come from these challenges in source of income and revenue flow is a basic ability to cover operating expenses, to model for financial sustainability. Decisions that organizations are making now in the short term actually do really have long-term repercussions, and the organizations are trying to position themselves to not just survive, but to really thrive for the long term. All of our organizations are also trying to again, do their financial modeling and figure out how to reopen from a position of strength. So all of our online engagement, our distance learning, our connection we're seeing in so many creative ways, online fitness classes, online discussion groups, online religious services, these are not only helping, during a very lonely time for many people who are finding themselves isolated, helping to create connection and belonging, but they're really sort of creating that runway and maintained connection so that when organizations reopen, we can, welcome people back in quickly. But we also know that when organizations reopen, there's going to be a runway to, resuming to full revenue stream. With JCCs, for example, we understand that it could take up to 6 months for memberships to return at their full level. And perhaps they won't even return at that level. In addition, we know that those organizations that provide social services, meet human service needs, are seeing significant increase in need and demand. And of course, they're also having to pivot in the way they offer their support and services. So while JFCS and others that have traditionally done home visits to seniors have had to pivot to figure out either how to do that safely or also how to connect with people in virtual ways. Jewish Free Clinic in Sonoma County has had to move to telehealth and adjust to everything that goes along with that. We know that our organizations that provide food and really other types of direct care have had to, again, look at how to both increase, meet an increased demand while also realigning. We've heard and seen some other significant concerns around increased domestic violence. If a home is not a safe space during good times, this shelter in place can really be devastating. Others who have history of mental health or other at-risk challenges are, are even more at risk during these very isolating times. Many organizations are looking at the 2008 recession as their benchmark for what we might expect for increased need for direct financial assistance, increased need for scholarship assistance, potential declines in memberships and enrollments. So there's a lot of, sort of trying to serve in real time while also, planning for the future. And of course, there have been various levels of infrastructure or technology adaptations that we've seen across the board. So here's, just kind of a snapshot of a few of the sort of sectors of organizations. And again, some of you are really on the front lines here and are, are really deep in the weeds and could probably have a lot to share. I mentioned JCCs already that have moved through really difficult decisions around furloughing staff, around reduced hours or salary cuts to others, to really focus on what are the essential infrastructure and operational needs that they need to cover during these times, and also positioning for hopefully reopening beginning in July. But again, there's uncertainty. Our overnight camps, while the public communication is still that our camps are, will run if it is safe to do so, we know that behind the scenes, there's all kinds of contingency planning and scenario planning that is underway that, that includes the potential for partial summer or no summer at all. The challenges for camps are that up to 50% of their expenses are fixed costs and year-round expenses for their year-round staff, for their campgrounds or maintenance of facilities. So, if they don't operate for the summer, they have all said that if they choose not to operate, they will refund in full the payments that families have made to date. It doesn't mean that the expense of operating camp goes away. Our Jewish day schools, if there was ever a question about the value proposition of Jewish day school, we have seen that they have excelled with distance learning. That was no easy feat, and they're doing a tremendous job really maintaining also a great deep sense of connection and Jewish enrichment for their children and their families. The challenges that Jewish day schools are looking at right now are delayed enrollment cycles. This is the time when families re-enroll or they expect new enrollments, and their ability to plan for future, for teacher rehires, to reissue teacher contracts, all hinge on getting a realistic projection of what their student body is going to look like. And if 2008 recession is any indicator, we know that schools are looking at the possibility of 10 to 25% reduced enrollment, which could really have long-term existential sustainability challenges for these schools. And I know we talked a bit already about the social service providers. I want to say just a word about a lot of the smaller innovation type organizations that are out there, which we've also been really in close communication and conversation with. Again, some of those that young adults in our community really count on very, very heavily for their sense of social connection and community. Organizations like Wilderness Torah and Urban Adamah and Moishe House are really looking at, again, both how they can maintain connection, but also what the implications might be if young adults in our community are seeing job loss at a very extensive rate. Will they be able to stay here in the Bay Area? Will they have to relocate? And how should we be thinking as a community about approaching the needs of our young adults? Again, just a snapshot. So what we are trying to do here at the Federation, and this links back to Danny's early framing, is to activate a multifaceted response from our Jewish philanthropic community. And for us here, that means looking at all of our sources of potentially available funds, raising new funds through a COVID response fund that we have opened, looking at our endowed resources, looking at annual fundraising, and then of course partnering deeply with donor advised fund holders and supporting foundations that are under our auspices to help focus them on, what's really important here and core around our emergency response. And that again are these two areas that you see addressing the urgent human service needs and fostering the resilience of our Jewish ecosystem. Here's just sort of another snapshot of a variety of ways that we are looking to respond, also with our philanthropic advisory practice, providing support and consultation to community organizations through various types of webinars, information sharing. Most recently has been support for a number of organizations to navigate the Small Business Administration's loan program. And this has happened on a national level through our national partner, JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America, as well as locally, coaching small organizations, making connections with banks so that they can access these public resources. And, as well, again, most recently, supporting organizations with some of the new technology concerns that we're hearing about, Zoom bombing and safe use of Zoom and other technology platforms online where there may be concerns about anti-Semitism or other types of disruption. So I want to go a little bit deeper and then on the two priority areas and how our grant making is rolling out. I know that was a question that a number of folks asked in advance and is certainly top of mind for all of you. We have already moved forward with our first round of grants, sort of in two ways to meet the immediate human service needs of vulnerable populations. Just before Passover, we awarded $655,000 to 17 or 18 organizations, the majority Jewish organizations working with support for vulnerable populations, and as well about 20% of those funds to non-sectarian organizations, really focusing on the challenges of food insecurity. We know that people are, with so much unemployment and so much uncertainty and so much change, are really facing a challenge around literally putting food on their tables. So food insecurity and access to healthcare. Those grants are actually, we have the list of them posted on our website, and we can share the link for anyone who wants to know more specifics. Within our Jewish ecosystem, we were really pleased and proud to be able to award grants to Jewish Family and Children's Services, both the San Francisco West Bay as well as in the East Bay, to Shalom Bayit, to Bay Area Jewish Healing Center, to the Campus for Jewish Living, to Sinai Memorial Chapel, Jewish Vocational Services, and others that I am certainly forgetting off the top of my head right now. We are now positioning to work on and to plan for our next round of grants, which are equally important, which are around stabilizing our Jewish ecosystem. Our timeline is to award significant round of grants in early May. We are in the process of sort of refreshing and gathering some more information from organization partners, an update from the survey that we mentioned earlier, as well as really understanding how new decisions that the organizations have made have affected their stability at this time in this short term. We see the grants that we are preparing to make as a bridge during, again, this short-term period where organizations are closed and revenue streams are blocked. We are looking at, across the core sectors of our community that are really important for the long-term vitality of Jewish life. Our JCCs, our Jewish day schools, Jewish preschools, Jewish overnight camps, and that, innovative sector that of engagement and cultural organizations that we have talked about. So with that, I think I might pause. Actually, before I pause, I'll just share here two more things that, are really, quite important. We, while I mentioned that we are looking at so many, activating a full philanthropic response in a broad way, for those of you who are on this call who are tried and true donors and leaders and supporters of the Federation and our Jewish community, this is the time to dig deep and to give. We welcome your support through our Emergency Response Fund. And we are seeking to raise $4 million at this phase. We know that there is a long phase ahead of us as well about looking at, the future of our Jewish organizations and, how the waves of the COVID crisis will continue to unfold. So at these kinds of times, there is no giving that's bad giving. So I encourage you to think about those organizations that are closest to you in your world, because each and every organization is feeling a pinch and a challenge, as well as to thinking about how you might join a collective communal response. So with that, I will pause. I might stop sharing for the moment so that we can see, so I can see more people. We welcome questions to me, to Danny, to some other Federation colleagues who are on the call, either by raising your hand or through the chat.
Roxanne, I see Peretz Wolf Poussin's hand is raised. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question, Rabbi?
With the vast number of teachers who are 1099, who usually are the raggedy edge of communal observation, but they're actually central to almost every Jewish organization who's teaching or providing services. And how is Federation looking at communally those people who are no longer receiving any funding because we're no longer providing direct services, or we've been reduced because of fees and tuitions?
So the way we are looking at direct support, so the way that we're looking at trying to increase the ability of direct support for individuals, one way is actually through a significant partnership that we have entered into with Hebrew Free Loan Association, which many of you know offers zero interest loans to people facing a variety of types of need and challenge, including related to job loss or furlough. We have worked with our donor advised funds through our Federation network and have secured $5 million to increase Hebrew Free Loans pool of funding available for loans. And these loans are available both to Jewish individuals as well as people of all faiths and backgrounds who work for Jewish organizations. We're also working with Hebrew Free Loan to make sure that they have the capacity to meet the demand. They have already, starting from the early days of this crisis, seen a significant increase in requests for loans, and they are working as fast as they can to process them and to get cash into the hands of people who need it to, again, bridge this these really challenging times. Besides that, we're very well aware that organizations are going through the process for the PPP Small Business Association loans, which will help them to be able to provide salary and other benefits to workers during these times. We've helped organizations, as I mentioned before, navigate that process. And the final thing is that through the grant funding that we're looking at doing, we do understand that even those organizations that have had to move to furlough have maintained health benefits to a large degree. And we are encouraging them to continue to do that. And we're looking at the grants ultimately that we will make as a way to help organizations continue that through this time. But thank you for raising that concern about Jewish educators and so many folks who are who might otherwise be not recognized during these times.
So the best response right now is loans. Is there any kind of way of acknowledging or reaching out to see who out there is no longer directly connected to, in a sense, a fraternal organization that considers themselves a Jewish teacher, but does not appear as a full-time, day school teachers are a fraction, full-time camp staff is a fraction. Is there any, by the way, I don't expect an answer today by any means. I think you've got it's a good presentation, and thank you very much. So I'm asking the question as an open-ended question for consideration.
I think it's a great one. And perhaps there's a way to partner with Jewish Learning Works, who has, I think, the biggest network and the broadest connection to all types of Jewish educators in our community. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and I will certainly follow up with Dana Sheenan and David Waxberg. I don't know if either of them are on the call. I think Dana was on our call last week. So I really appreciate that question and suggestion.
Yeah, and I also want to express my appreciation. I mean, I think that's important for us to think about. You may recall that when we had the opportunity to launch the student loan debt relief pilot, our focal point was Jewish educators at sort of the lower level of the income ladder, because we recognize how important that is for our community and how important they will be to the future of our community. So thank you for that.
I see a question in the chat from Rabbi David Bush. Can we share a bit about how, maybe that was directly just to me, about how organizations, including Chabad's, fit into the stabilizing picture? And I guess that sort of, could be, sort of a universal question. And, there is a challenge here of really understand, of being able to figure out how to, sort of reach and support the breadth of our Jewish community. We are looking at how, first, those organizations that have been most significantly impacted by lost revenue from the types of streams we've been talking about. And generally, those are the organizations that have preschools, camps, and are really depend on membership dues. I am hopeful that there will be opportunities along the way as we continue to go through this to be looking, really fully broadly and inclusively across our Jewish, the whole landscape of Jewish organizations. And so that's sort of the answer to that for now.
I see Rachel Beal has her hand up physically.
Yeah, because can't find the button. First of all, thank you. This is very encouraging, reassuring. You're creating this sort of sense of community holding itself and each other together, which is great. In addition to all the bad stuff, there's also an incredible moment of opportunity to reach out to Jews who are not affiliated with the Jewish community, because everybody is desperate for connection. And mostly it's done through sending each other funny memes, but I feel like there should be a team of 3 or 4 really creative, tech-savvy people who should be coming up with ways that we can capitalize on that and reach out to 400,000 Jews in the Bay Area who are needing connection and don't know what the organized community has to offer.
I think that's so important. And I'm looking at the little Hollywood square of my colleague, Wendy Verba, and wondering if Wendy wants to add something about really the importance of connection at this time. And, you know, I actually think I agree with you that there is such an opportunity where as a community, we often do focus on who are our members and who's coming in our doors. And the fact now that so much of this engagement is on a platform like this, it really, frankly, can create some tremendous opportunity for people wherever they're sitting to find an element of connection. Wendy, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Well, many of you on this call have been working with us over the last couple of years to experiment with different ways of connecting with people, ensuring that everyone feels seen and heard and valued and a sense of belonging. And we were doing that in person for a couple of years. And as soon as we had to switch to this modality, we found that those tools were even more relevant than ever. And so we have been doing workshops, practice groups, all kinds of Zoom experiments, trying out new ways of using this chat rooms and really coming up with great ways to expand that kind of connection. It's not a great replacement for face-to-face, human interaction, but it's amazing how much you can reach people. And we've been trying to provide a forum for all of our Jewish organizations and leaders to experiment with those opportunities. And in fact, there's some things we may find that we want to keep. You break through all kinds of geographic boundaries, for instance, and you're able to reach people who can't leave their homes or who work too much to drive across the Bay Area to get to something. So there are opportunities that we might want to continue and continue this kind of in this mode. But we're really open to anyone who wants to learn with us how to do this. It's been a really exciting process.
I know also the J News Weekly has really tried to open its platform to publicize all kinds of online engagement. And the more I think, and also the Federation on our website, we do also have a calendar where we have encouraged organizations to post online, what their online offerings are in place of what have been in-person gatherings. And I think that the more that we can cross-pollinate through social media to, promote and to understand that the more is the more, we will hopefully together reach, really, really broad audiences. I noticed that there was a question in the chat about how do you make decisions about giving during these times when so many organizations have appeals. And, I really, really believe that there's no giving that's bad giving, and that, sort of taking a few moments to think personally about, your values and what's most important to you in the change that you want to see in our community and in our world is really important. I know that our philanthropy team has some tools that can help, individuals and families have conversations about setting philanthropic priorities. And I would say there's no better time than the present to do that. I hope, and what we really do encourage the people who we talk to is, again, to think about, those organizations in your own orbit, because every single one is facing need, and to join in some way in a collective communal response, because we really are stronger together. So we hope that you will, join us and choose to support the Federation through our COVID response. I also want to mention, I know Erin Cattler is on this call representing Upstart, and they have really made a commitment to Jewish innovators in our community, those who have really been on the forefront of really creating and making real change in our community around Jewish engagement. And these are some of the smallest organizations. These are some of the educators, I think, Peretz, that you've also talked about, and people who are really looking to individuals and organizations that are looking to sustain through these challenging times, get to the other side of this, so that they can continue to provide their excellent services to our community. So if that's of interest, I encourage you to look up and reach out to Upstart as well. I wanted to mention one other thing before and then we can see if there are additional questions. We know that, that this is a global pandemic. And as an organization, our federation has historically has always had a commitment to our local Jewish community as well as to peoplehood globally. And we have, through some funding that we have, endowed restricted funds that we have at the Federation, been able to take a look at what the needs are in Israel related to emergency response. Again, you know, sort of with a similar frame as we're looking at here, vulnerable populations, including seniors at risk, immigrants otherwise isolated. And we are also moving forward with about $800,000 of grants to organizations in Israel, some of them through our you know, lead partners, the JDC, American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, and Jewish Agency for Israel, and to other organizations on the front line and on the ground. So these are funds other than what we're raising directly through our COVID response, but for any of you out there who are, you know, also interested in, you know, who's doing what on the ground in Israel, we're happy to share what we have learned. Avi has his hand raised. Avi Rose?
Yeah, thanks, Roxanne. I wanted to pick up on Rachel's question about the opportunity to engage a broader world of people. Just to chime in that, you know, we tend to think of engaging people as those who need our services or, you know, consumers of something that we're offering. But I think this is also a time when people need to feel useful and that there's something constructive that they can do. So I strongly encourage people, you know, where it's possible, to engage people as volunteers and to and advocates, and to you know, take this opportunity to stretch beyond your usual universe that you call on, that this is a time that people are looking to do something.
Do you have any ideas specifically?
I mean, I have our own experience of, you know, the kind of response we've gotten to people who are, you know, giving phone support to seniors, grocery shopping for people who can't get out themselves because of their own risk. Just that people, you know, that putting out the call, people are sitting at home wanting to do something that's useful.
Thank you.
So I note that there aren't any other hands raised right now. I just wanted to speak for a moment about the longer range issues, just so it's clear to you that we're aware of them. I think when this crisis struck, we were all very focused and continue to be focused on the emergent needs, both of the people we serve and of our own organizations. And I think in the back of our minds after week probably 2, we were all acutely aware of the severity of the long range implications and how long that tail was going to be. As Roxanne said, we have very much in mind trying to mobilizing our partners in support of those longer range needs, which is we expect to be a much bigger lift and will require a collective response. And it's something that we're beginning to speak about. And I say this only by way of acknowledging that what you heard about today, you know, addresses a lot of these immediate concerns of the coming months. But you may be wondering what about beyond that. So that covers that a little bit. So there aren't any hands raised in the hand raise function. I'm just going to allow for a couple more seconds before we wind up, looking to see if there's any physical hands raised, but not seeing those either. Roxanne, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
I just, again, thanks to everybody for caring so much and for joining together professionals, volunteers, leadership, donors. I think this is really what community is about. I know that there's a lot of anxiety on all kinds of levels, and it really comes down to the safety and security of the people who are important to us. So we're in this together, and I really appreciate being able to do this work, and thank you.
Yeah, and I send the thanks, my thanks also to all of you. We can only do this together, and I love that you all show up, not with the question of why or whether, but how. How can we be most effective? How can we volunteer? What can we fund first? I think these are all the right questions. So God willing, we'll find the right way. Wish you all a Chag Sameach, and hope you're continuing to enjoy the Passover holiday. And we'll be back in touch soon. Bye.
Thank you.